Hi, in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to prepare an image for some camera projection in Nuke, but camera projection that also uses or incorporates parallax. Okay, so parallax is basically the difference in movement between objects that are at different distances from the camera. So an example of that in this image, for example, is that if the camera was moving towards this pillar, we'd probably expect this pillar to move slightly more than, say, the wall in the background. So this pillar might look like it's moving along, and that's just sort of a parallax effect because it's nearer to us than the background. So you'll see that this tutorial is in Photoshop because what we're going to look at here is just preparing the image for use in Nuke. So in order to be able to do this in Nuke, we have to have separate images to project. Okay, and so you'll see that we start off with just a still JPEG image. There it is as a background layer. So, and that's sort of locked up. So I'm going to double click that to start with, and it will say, okay, do you want to name it layer 0? I'm happy with that. So I'll call that layer 0. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out this pillar and this little banister here, so that, like I said, we can then project that separately, so it moves differently to the background. So in order to do that here, I'm going to just use the polygonal lasso tool. I've got my navigator open here, so that allows me to zoom in, and then I can use the little box that gives me to sort of select the area I want to move into. You can also, while you're on the image, in fact, I'll zoom out a little bit. Probably don't need to be that zoomed in with this. While you're over the image, you can hold spacebar, and that will allow you to sort of just click and drag to move around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off the frame, and I'm going to just sort of line up my lasso. There we go, with the edge of that pillar, and then I'm going to just follow it up. At this point, you'll probably see that I've selected this on purpose because it does make it quite easy. It is quite an easy thing to cut out with this tool, but you know, that shouldn't discourage you from trying more complex shapes. You can Photoshop. It's not overly difficult to sort of cut things out. So the only problem is obviously we have to just scroll down a bit because I'm zoomed in, and I'm going to just click about there, select that area, and I'm just going to move along here as well. There we go. Brilliant. So that seems to be okay. Just going to go down, and now I'm just going to select on the outside area. Okay, once I've done that, there we go. Zoom out, and I've got my selection. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control X if you're on a Windows, or Command X if you're on a Mac. But I'll use the Windows shortcut. So Control X should just cut that out. Now if I do Control V, which is paste, obviously you could just do edit, cut, edit, paste as well. If I do Control V, what will happen is you'll see it'll just paste into the center of the image. So I'm going to undo that for a second. That's not what I want to do. Instead, if you hold Shift at the same time, so Control Shift V, it does a paste in place, and so it pastes it back into the exact same position it cut it from. Now I do find it sort of gives you these little white outlines sometimes, and I think that's just to do with the way the lasso tool was sort of moving across diagonally. I found that once you project it, that doesn't appear in there anyway, in the image. So we've got that. And if we just, like I said, turn that off, you'll see now we've got a background. So what we're going to need to do here is, so we've got a background with bits cut out. So we're going to need to paint some of that back in. Okay, and the reason we're going to do that is because if we are moving, having a camera movement, we start to reveal the background as we move around this pillar, we need something behind it to show. Now there are a few ways around it. You could, in Nuke, just actually make this pillar a little bit bigger, so you could just rescale it up, and by scaling it up, you know, it might cover about this much of the wall, so you can just reveal that bit. But in this case, we're going to paint it back. Another thing as well is before you do the camera movement, it's worth thinking about what exactly you're trying to achieve. So in other words, in this example, you know, which way do I want the camera to go? Is it going to reveal the wall on the left, or is it going to reveal the wall on the right? How much of that wall is it going to reveal? So you want to think about all these things, so you're not painting in areas that don't really matter, so you're not wasting your time with that. Okay, so just keep that in mind as well. So in this case, what I'm going to do is, and by the way, you can just paint, so we'll turn the top layer off, so you can just paint directly onto here. But what I generally do is I always add a blank layer in, so it's just outside the recording area, but there's underneath your layer panels here, you've got a add new layer button, so, or create new layer it's called. So I'm going to click that. So I've got myself a new layer, and I'm going to paint the background into there, and I just do that because if anything goes wrong or there's a mistake, I can just delete this whole layer rather than having painted it onto the final background. So that's just the way I sort of work. So I'm going to use, in this example, I'm going to use a clone stamp tool. Sometimes you may not see it because it depends which tool is sort of selected. So you hold your mouse down and on the button, and you can reveal the other buttons hidden within it. That's what these little triangles in the corner mean. The disclosure triangles. And if you see one, it just means there's other options available in that group. Okay, but so I'm going to click that. Now I've already kind of gone into the brush settings here, and I've set the hardness down as much as I possibly could. Okay, softer brush will help hide the areas you painted over, sorry. Yeah, stick with a soft brush, and I've gone for sort of a fairly large size, which is fine, but I could probably have a little bit bigger, but I'm fine with that. And apart from that, this is where the sample comes from, and it's sort of just set to current and below. There's nothing on the current level, so that should be okay. But yeah, you'd only need to keep an eye on that if you're painting on a new blank layer. Okay, otherwise it wouldn't really matter at all. Okay, so we're ready to paint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit because that will sort of help out, and just to see where I'm going. And what we do with the clone stamp tool then is you hold the Alt key down to an area that you want to select, and then you click and drag. So if you think about it, your original paintbrush is still there. In fact, you'll see it when I start to paint now as a crosshair. So where I'm painting here, so now as I start to paint, can you see the crosshair on the left of my paintbrush? That is the area I'm actually painting in. So as I move along, I'm just painting that back in. So you'll see I'm kind of doing that. There, I've reached the top of the canvas, so there's nothing else. I can get around that in a minute. That's not really a big problem. One of the things I would suggest is if you are doing painting, try to paint as close as you can to the area that you're copying or cloning, should I say. What you'll find is that this wall obviously has been painted one color, but it doesn't look one color. It's darker in some areas, it's lighter in others, depending on how the light's hitting it. So you want to paint from as close an area as possible to hopefully hide any issues. And here what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to hold the Alt key down again and select an area and click and drag, and then let go of the Alt key, and again I should be able to just paint, there we go, hopefully to match that up. And again, so I'm just painting across from there, and so you can see that's kind of working out quite well. So that's kind of basically what I'm doing, and what I'm now, like I said, adding in is this additional part of the wall that didn't exist before. So I can then later on, like I said, move around that pillar and I can reveal some of that wall. So you do have to, for a lot of VFX works, you do normally have to prepare images and things like that. It's unlikely, it's sort of ready to go. So there's always a lot of work to do. Here you can see it's actually cloning around that little dot. If I don't want that, I could just select another point somewhere else and paint from there, paint over that. It wouldn't be too big a deal. So I'm going to just quickly go through here, and I'm just moving to a lot faster than I normally would, and I'd take my time, but I think the principle's sort of been explained, and then it's really a case of just trying that out. So I'm just going to add a bit more here as well, by the way, so there's not enough wall there. Perhaps I want to reveal a bit more, so I kind of decide how far back do I actually want to go. But yeah, like I said, so anyway, that's that bit done, and I'm going to do the same here. Again, just click Alt and drag, and then I should hopefully be able to select the top of that, and you can see again that's sort of painted. Again, I'll probably have the same issue at the bottom. I'll hit kind of the edge of the canvas, but I can sort of work around that in a minute. But there we go. So I've kind of painted along and sort of created part of that wall, and you can see there's slight shifts in the color. It's not, doesn't match perfectly. You can see where it's been painted over, so that may need some additional work. There's a few things you could do. You could blur the edges slightly, so I think we've got a so we've got like a blur tool that we could use to try to blur some of those edges in. Now this is again the good thing about having it as its own layer. So if I turn the background off, I can now go in and start to blur some of those edges up, or do any other kind of adjustments that I would like to this layer without affecting anything else, to sort of just match it up better. Okay, and just for the top, by the way, so I could again just Alt and click from somewhere else, and then hopefully, oh right, okay, I'm not on the tool, that's why I'm on the wrong tool again. But like I said, Alt, click and drag, and just sort of paint some of that back in as well if I want to. Oops, Yeah, so we can kind of fill that in. Like I said, once we're done with that, we'll drop this back in, and you can, like I said, see that there. So I wonder if the blur tool will help out much at all. So that will soften up that brush edge a bit there. Let's make that a bit bigger as well, and see if that just helps kind of blend it in a bit. Perhaps if we blur that up a bit. So it just looks too bright, actually, doesn't it? It's just a little bit too light. So we might need to go in actually and just make an overall color adjustment. So you've got hue and so on changes. You could, well, sorry, not hue, but sort of saturation and things like that, and that might sort of help fix that up. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to finish this tutorial off for now, just by saying, so what we've got is, so we've got our column, like I said. So once we're done, now once you're happy with what you've painted in, and as long as you feel it works, notice, by the way, I didn't do any painting on this side because I've already decided the camera movement I'm going to have is only going to reveal the left hand side of the pillar. So again, like I said, important to know where your camera is actually going. What I'm going to do here is, what you would need to do is, when you're finished with that, you would have to select both of these layers and right click and oops, let's see if we can just do that from here. No, okay. Might need to control click on this. I'm working with Mac. Right click and just merge those two layers so they do become one. So that's kind of one layer, and then the other layer is this. And then what you would do is turn one of those layers off, select this, and we will say File, Save As. And when we say Save As, let's just go into this Photoshop folder here. What we're going to do is a couple of things. So rather than saving as a Photoshop file, and I think that's still supported as well in Nuke, but I find something like a TIFF is more widely supported overall, so I've generally sort of used that. So what I'm going to do is click TIFF. Now PNGs also support transparency, because that's a key thing here, by the way. Transparency doesn't really matter on the background, so some image formats support transparency, some don't. It doesn't really matter if we have transparency here. It would just replace it with a big white section if it didn't support it. But I'm going to save a format that does support transparency. So like I said, I can go in and I'm going to select a TIFF. PNG will do the same. JPEGs don't support transparency, but TIFFs retain more color information and things like that as well, so it's usually a better option. It does also mean, though, you get larger file sizes. So a couple of things, though. One, I'm going to uncheck layers. Okay, when you do save as a TIFF, go into my Photoshop folder, which is where I'm going to save it, and I'll give this a name. I'll just call it background or something. Okay, there we go. And when I click save, I also want to make sure that save transparency is ticked. Okay, again, like I said, in this background, that doesn't really matter. I'll just leave it on. But with the foreground, it definitely does. So here, we only want to export out this pillar. We don't want to export out any of that background, but we still want it to export out this canvas size, so that way the pillar pops up in the exact same place in frame. So we still need this canvas. Okay, so again, we just do the same thing, and we go File, Save As, and again, in this case, I'm going to save that as a TIFF. Uncheck layers. Again, you can see, by the way, I'm showing the back pillar layer now, not the background. And again, so I'll give that name pillar. Actually, I'll call it pillar 2 because I'd already done one beforehand. I don't want to overwrite that one. Saved it as a TIFF. Uncheck layers, click save, and make sure save transparency is ticked. Click OK, and there we go. So I've got both of those now saved as layers with a transparent background that I can then use in Nuke. So the second part of this tutorial will then show you how to manage those in Nuke. Okay.